Hello, it's Cran here with a breakdown for Colossal Swords, otherwise known as UGS from previous games. This is the shorthand I will use, as CS can easily be confused with something like curved swords. The thing about Colossal Swords is that their most famous move is the infamous poke. If you've PvP'd or gotten invaded, you must have seen this before. UGS defenders are gonna say, but UGS has other moves like their running attack or whatnot, but the entire UGS kit is definitely centered around this overtuned and way too fast attack for the UGS. Still, we can't forget about their other movesets, so let us take a look at the unique movesets of some UGS. This is the regular light attack chain of Colossal Swords. This is the unique light attack chain of the Godslayer Sword, which is quicker than the regular Colossal Swords. This is the regular heavy and charged heavy attack of Colossal Swords. This is the heavy and charged heavy attack of the Zweihander and Troll Knight Sword. This is the unique heavy and charged heavy attack of the Greatsword, which has a tiny bit lower NV or damage percent as well. This is the unique heavy and charged heavy attack of the Ruin's Greatsword. The heavy attack is actually the same as the regular Colossal Swords, just with a slightly different animation effect. The charged heavy attack is where the difference is at, with the additional AoE. Starscourge Greatsword is a paired weapon, so its two-handed moveset is greatly changed. It also loses the poke attack because of that. From the different movesets, you will notice that the heavy version only swings one blade, like the one-handed version, instead of both blades, so this weapon's heavy attacks aren't quite as effective. These are the ranges of the Colossal Swords. The Greatsword that is actually a Colossal Sword is henceforth abbreviated GUGS, or GUGS, because it sort of looks like Guts Greatsword from the manga Berserk, which is basically also a hunk of metal. Now let us take a look at the attack rating, otherwise known as AR, of the weapons and draw some conclusions. First on our list, we have the Grafted Blade Greatsword, which is a strength-oriented weapon reflected by its high strength requirements. Oath of Vengeance's description is quite misleading. It raises all attributes by 5 for 30 seconds and grants an unstaggerable effect like Endure. But the unstaggerable effect it grants doesn't last for the duration of the buff effects. It only lasts for 1.75 seconds, which is made even shorter by the animation of the move itself, as the effect kicks in from the beginning of the animation. Since the more important part of the weapon art, the stat bonus, is a set amount of levels, this weapon is a lot better at lower levels. At higher levels, the stats matter a lot less, and you usually would want to optimize without the stat bonuses. The weapon art's effect carries over, even if you swap off the weapon, as indicated by the green glow around you. Next is the Godslayer's Greatsword. This weapon has quite the hefty stat requirement, while being split damage. The main reason you would want to use this weapon would be the unique weapon art, the Queen's Black Flame. This weapon art applies Black Flame to hit enemies, and also allows for a follow-up attack. Both the weapon art itself and the follow-up grants 156 hyper armor. This weapon art deals quite a bit of damage and poise damage, in addition to applying Black Flame, which sort of makes up for its lower AR. as 760 to 800 AR as a split damage weapon for this level of stat investment isn't a lot for Colossal Swords. Heck, the Grafted blade we just covered has more AR while not being split damage, which will deal more damage most of the time, even if we take into account the difference in weight. Still, the weapon art and its faster light attack chain makes this Colossal Sword still worth a consideration. Maliketh's Black Blade also has a unique weapon art, Destined Death, which applies the death debuff to your enemies, reducing their max HP by 10% for 15 seconds. The weapon art also grants 500 hyper armor and applies Black Flame to hit enemies. I can't check everything on the wiki, so I just randomly select some stuff to read. They have to pay me at this point. What the heck is this random guesswork? 60% physical and 40% holy? The weapon art is based off of the weapon's AR. Since this weapon is split scaling, it depends totally on how much stat you're investing. For this weapon, right before you hit the 58 strength soft cap for unique weapons, it would be better to invest the final point into Faith instead. As you can see here, Maliketh's AR is quite a bit higher than the Godslayer's, and this isn't even the highest split scaling UGS. The Troll Knight's Sword is a troll weapon. This weapon doesn't have a unique weapon art. You can get Troll's Roar from an Ash of War, and despite having an intelligence portion as a split scaling weapon, the base magic damage and intelligence scaling is crap, so you want to invest equally into strength and dexterity. Of course, do the math for two-handing if you plan on two-handing. But my suggestion is to throw this weapon into the gutter. I mean, just compare it to the Godslayer for example, which also has a low AR. The Troll Knight's Sword has low AR as a split scaling weapon, and is one of the shortest UGS, while weighing 0.5 more than the Godslayer, which also has a faster light attack chain. This one is one of the most boring and pointless UGS in the video, even though I think it looks quite nice. What a shame. Next, the Ruin's Greatsword, while being fat and short, has a S scaling in strength, so quite obviously fully invest into strength. It also has a unique weapon art, Wave of Destruction, which also grants 500 hyper armor. This and its unique heavy attack are going to be the reasons why you would want to pick this weapon. While indeed it reaches quite the high AR, it lacks the length to effectively be a spear, being the second shortest Colossal Sword. The intelligence and magic portion of the weapon, you ask? I'm fairly sure it's just there to justify firing off gravitational powers. Royal Greatsword comes up next with yet another unique weapon art, and is also the weapon of a much beloved character, Blade. Jeez, with so many unique weapon arts, they really did the Troll Knight's Sword dirty. Anyway, this one actually allows you to properly invest into intelligence to quickly get a huge chunk of AR. For the first stat investment, I didn't hit 50 intelligence because it does have quite a bit of requirements on strength and dexterity. I wanted to show its high AR without skewing it to have more stat points, but you would want to push its int to 50 before upgrading your strength. So technically, you can reach a high AR without that high amount of stat requirements. Wolf's Assault is a really cool weapon art that actually allows you to apply Frostbite, despite the weapon having no Frostbite at all. Also, as with other flying weapon arts, you have infinite hyper armor, while your body is not attached to the ground. Finally, the Starscourge Greatsword, Radon's very own greatsword. As previously mentioned, this weapon's two-handed version turns it into a paired weapon, where you hold one copy in each hand. There are components to Starcaller Cry that scale better off intelligence, but you would still predominantly want to invest into strength, because the two-handed version makes it a paired weapon that loses the poking attack for PvP. This weapon loses one of the Colossal Sword's biggest tools. Still, Starcaller Cry can pull off some really nice wins in invasions, especially with the 500 hyper armor bonus and the pull-in effect. Moving on to the regular weapons, we have the Zweihander, which is by far the lightest UGS, Troll's Golden Sword, Watchdog's Greatsword, and Greatsword. Starting with the heavy infusion, I've placed them in order from lightest to heaviest. And with the weights in place, you will easily see that the Greatsword comes out on top in terms of AR, while being the longest UGS. Even at 80 strength soft cap, the Watchdog still doesn't overtake the GUGS in terms of AR, even though it has higher scaling. Even if we take a look at the fire infusion, the same holds true regardless of which soft cap you choose. For a strength option, this is undoubtedly the best Colossal Sword when you're not looking for special attacks like the Ruin's Greatsword. As for Keen, this is going to be a choice because of your build and Ash of War selection, but Colossal Swords have high strength requirements. It is still possible to run them with a dexterity build because you very often two-hand these weapons, so the strength requirements can be slightly lower. However, all but the Zweihander scale better to strength. But this is Zweihander's Keen stat with the strength requirements not met for one-handing, or even two-handing in this case. We're going to check for the one-handed version now because two-handing heavy would give it a bigger scaling boost which favors strength even more. If we alter the stats to meet the strength requirements, we see that the Keen version actually slightly loses to the heavy version. Still, you might want a Keen weapon art like Beast Roar on your Zweihander, so this isn't that bad of an option. And what about the Gugs? The weight difference between the Zweihander and the Gugs is 7.5, which translates to a 10.71 weight difference for medium roll. Depending on your endurance level, it's somewhere between 8 to 11 points of endurance stat without the equip load talismans. If we meet the 31 strength requirement and also reduce the amount of stats by 11 for the equip load, the Zweihander does indeed have a higher AR than the Gugs. And here is the Keen Zweihander at 80 dexterity on the right, and the one with 73 dexterity on the left. If we compare them to the heavy version, we see that even the lower dex version beats the heavy. And once again, another check for the Gugs still shows the Zweihander to come out on top. Next comes the Lightning Infusion, where I will simply start with 19 strength instead of 12. Otherwise, it would just be the mirror of the Fire Infusion anyway. And this is the 73 dex mark, after subtracting 7 from dexterity to account for the additional strength. The interesting thing here is if we compare the first soft cap for the Lightning version, we find that the Zweihander once again beats the Gugs. However, if we do the same comparison for the next soft cap, the Gugs actually comes out on top with 4.5% more AR. So if you want to do a dexterity build, you would actually go for Zweihander for Keen and Greatsword for Lightning. But is that really strictly the case? There are two more caveats. Because Colossal Swords are often two-handed, if you only two-hand your Colossal Sword, the first thing to keep in mind is the amount of strength stat points saved. This favors the Gugs as it saves 10 points of investment versus the Zweihander's 6 points of investment. The second point of contention depends on your weapon art, which you probably don't know how to properly calculate yet, as my video on that is still not out. But for bullet arts, it scales to your stat investment. So Zweihander will have 15% more damage for lightning bullet arts and 26% more damage for keen bullet arts, using 50 dex on Gugs versus Zweihander's 73 dex. While this might sound like a large number, the overall effect is much less, because if you're picking a Colossal Sword, you're probably there to utilize its moveset. If you want to spam weapon arts, a dagger could do the same thing, with much less weight. These are just some extra things to keep in mind though. Next, Quality Infusion as usual is more for endgame PvE, when you have lots of strength and dexterity. For meta PvP levels, as you see right here, the AR even with more stat investment is lower than either the heavy or keen infusion. Flame and Sacred are two sides of the same coin at max weapon upgrade, where you're only picking between the elements. Zweihander is a great choice if you want to maintain a high level of faith to mix with incantations, but in terms of AR, it will indeed lose to the Gugs if stat standardized. Still, you wouldn't really choose this infusion unless you're offhanding a seal, so it is usually more beneficial to just stick to the Zweihander to utilize the UGS's moveset while maintaining high faith, especially because the Zweihander is the second longest UGS, you don't lose much length. Also, one more thing, compared to the Malikeths, if you're just going for raw AR and don't mind strength investment, Gugs beat the Maliketh in terms of AR as well. And this is the 80 faith mark. Once again, the Gugs beats the Zweihander, but the Zweihander build will allow for a much stronger Sacred Seal. And these conclusions translate to the Magic Infusion, which is basically the intelligence version of Flame and Sacred. While the Gugs can beat the Zweihander in terms of AR, you would lose a lot of sorcery scaling on your offhanded staff or a magic bullet art. Unlike the Malikeths versus the Sacred Gugs though, the Royal Greatsword actually beats the Gugs in terms of AR at the same stat investment level. This should really show you just how much AR the Royal Greatsword has. As for code, these are done with 75 stat point investment, but probably to nobody's surprise, the Gugs comes out on top even if we take the weight difference into account. As for the poison and blood infusion, even the Zweihander is better off with just 45 points of strength instead of 19 strength and investing the rest into dexterity. But the Gugs will once again win if we reduce the stat points due to its weight. With how fast the crouch poke comes out, these status infusions are actually really annoying in PvP with phantom hits, as you can proc the status effect fairly easily with the Colossal Sword's high base status buildup combined with its fast attack move. Since Colossal Swords have high strength requirements and no base status buildup, the Occult infusion is not recommended at all. Alright, let's do a quick summary. The Grafted Blade Greatsword is a better option at lower levels as the unique weapon art is more effective. Both the Maliketh's Black Blade and Godslayer's Sword will be selected mostly because of their weapon art, which are both more PvE oriented due to their slow cast speed. The Godslayer's also has a slightly faster light attack chain than other Colossal Swords. Ruin's Greatsword will be selected for its unique charged heavy attack and weapon art, and the Starscourge Greatsword offers a different playstyle with its paired moveset. The Troll Knight's sword doesn't offer anything unique other than looking cool. The Royal Greatsword has high AR and a weapon art that can apply frostbite. In general, all Colossal Sword unique weapon arts are on the slower end of things, so the weapon arts are all more suited towards PvE than PvP. As for infusible weapons, the Troll's Golden Sword and Watchdog's Sword are just inferior compared to the Zweihander or the Gugs. Zweihander is good for Keen, Magic, or Flame and Sacred. You want the lighter weight so you can still invest harder into either Intelligence or Faith in order to have higher damage on your offhand Catalyst. As for the Gugs, this is not only the longest Colossal Sword, but it also has the highest AR across the board for infusible Colossal Swords, excluding Keen. Combined with the poke Colossal Swords can do, makes this truly a frightening weapon in PvP. Like and subscribe, and if you want to support my channel, please buy my fantasy novel, which will also allow you to request me a specific topic or expedite any topic you want covered. See you next time.